Welcome to Sounds Like Portraits. I'm Philip Ungar. This is a podcast with creative humans. Miranda Thomas is a potter. Her pottery is collected in many places around the world. When I sat with her, she told me that clay is the body of her work. What happens to it is an expression of who she is. It's a very humble material that constantly tests her and grounds her. When I asked about her biggest learning from a creative process, she answered, to be a better mother. It's time to listen to her. But before she told me what she tried to do all her life.
All my life, I've tried to be true to myself and to find out who that is and how to express the awe I have around me.
Why is it so difficult to find ourselves?
I always think other people do know who they are, and I didn't. So I went digging, I think, is how the only way I can explain it.
So it's about connecting with yourself.
Yes, and trying to be true to oneself, because you're taken down all these different pathways and you think, oh, wait, stop, this isn't me. And so you've got to find the green lights and then the stop lights and run away from things you don't like and just keep going towards the things you do like.
How did you come to pottery?
I was in Australia, and I was fresh from New York, actually. Fresh being 3 years, I'd moved from New York. So I was a bit of a renegade in this very sort of uptight, conservative place, it felt like. I took art at college, and suddenly the whole art department was changed into a pottery because we had a new art master, and he felt that art was such a perfect mix of science, art, and business as well, and he wanted to teach all those aspects of art as well. And so pottery seemed like a really good thing to get kids busy, moving, doing. So I just happened to be really good at it, I guess. So I got singled out, and then he invited me to be one of the so-called chosen ones to go to his pottery classes in the evening with a whole bunch of fellow people who were seeking out philosophy and all sorts of things. And so I was a 16-year-old thrown in the deep end of a very erudite sort of pottery world. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. And all my friends we were all surfers at the beach. And everybody was really into being a surfer. But I love going to art museums, and to be able to just spend this time in the back shed, I got myself a pottery wheel, and I just never tired of it. I kept trying and trying. And I guess it gave me a lot of attention because I was singled out. It made my friends go ooh ah, it made my parents go ooh ah, it made my examiners go ooh ah, and it's suddenly like, wow, I'm a female. Maybe I could do this in my kitchen if I'm having kids, because in those days, being a woman, it was quite expected of you to be a nurse or a secretary. And I thought, no, I could make money doing this, because he was teaching us a little about business. We used to give our pots to charity, so I would find myself in the pottery a lot, and quite frankly, it saved my life.
What kind of clay do you like to use?
Clay is like cooking with rocks, and it really is like cooking with rocks, and I am happiest in the kitchen in the pottery. And the clay that I use is my own recipe, and it took me 2 years to come up with it, and it is a delicious clay called Foundry Hill Cream from North Carolina, mixed with a sister mine clay called C&C Ball Clay, which is a white sticky stoneware clay, and it marries beautifully with Foundry Hill Cream. And then I add some flint, which is silica. I add some feldspar, which is, I think, like Elmer's glue in the pottery cooking world, and a grog, which is like a fill in it, which makes it stand up like bricks. And I actually have a team of potters that help me make the pots, and I have been exploring, you could say, surface decoration in pots for the last 20 years. So it's not just about making, it's also marrying decoration with making.
Experiencing different styles.
Experiencing, or again digging, finding your own style. And that has really been the quest all the way along. And that style evolves and changes. But the clay is your flour, your sugar. It's got everything in it, and it's the body of your work. But what happens to it, how you fire it, how you cook it, everything is such a expression of who you are. But it's very humble material, and it constantly tests you and grounds you.
What comes first when you start making a piece? Is it the material or is it the idea?
I think always the idea, but the better ideas don't happen until you started making and then light bulbs go off. So you think you're going to start making something and then the light bulbs go off and you go, oh, wow, let's try that. And then you go off and, oh, but now I can try this. And I would have never have thought of that before I started.
To be able to start, you have to start.
Yes, absolutely. You just have to begin. And you have to begin in the most rudimentary way. And it could be just, picking up a piece of clay. It could be just sort of putting on your apron or washing your hands, just to get your brain into that place. I call it flow.
What do you feel when the flow is coming?
You don't feel anything because it's like a river flowing with no dams, nothing stopping you. It's almost like Alice in Wonderland going into a hole and the rest of the world shuts out and you can go exploring, you can see the most amazing things. But when the real world starts hammering at your door, you just it hurts to pull yourself back out of it.
Would you say that while working on the clay, you're having a conversation with it?
You definitely are having a conversation with it. You're having a conversation with all your teachers. You're having a conversation with the day, the birds and the bushes. You're having a conversation with the clay. And the clay is sort of listening, but it's not as groovy as it sounds. It's also a taskmaster, and you have to have control over it. You have to be fit.
How would you describe the impact of the clay on you while working on it?
The only way I can describe it is that it's to do with touch, and it's to do with the smell of it, and it informs you whether it's soft, whether it's hard. You've got this idea that you want to get out of it, so you have to sort of toss it around in your hands a bit. You have to weigh it. You have to just start, and then the clay, you have to know when to let go too. You have to let it have the upper hand if you want to make better stuff. So we have this conversation like, oh, where's the belly? Where's the foot? Where is the neck? How much did I go in? Oh, damn, I've pushed you too far. And then sometimes the clay just starts sort of howling and saying, I can't. And then you just have to let go and say, all right, that's how you are. We'll see how you fire. Because often your favorite things that you think are just brilliant, they get fired, they go through the process and they look terrible at the end. And the ones that were really lame ducks are just wonderful when they come out. So you just don't know until the end. And then they can crack, they can break. You just have to let go.
We are going to talk about the firing process, which is really amazing and interesting. But let's take an example. If you want to start to make a cup of tea, let's take a cup of tea. What's the first step?
Well, first of all, I'm thinking about tea and drinking tea in the physical aspect of your mouth hitting the lip of the cup. I'm also thinking about the tea has to be really hot inside, and it tastes better when it's really hot. So it's really the contact and how the liquid sits in the middle of the cup. And when you're drinking it, what do you see? When you come to the end, what do you see? And when you're washing it up, what do you see? But it's also a servant. So it's there with your most private moments. It's there when you're resting. It's there maybe during tremendous stress. So it's got to communicate with you somehow. So I often will put little things there that will not interrupt you too much, but will be very subtle, so you can learn to live with it and really love it.
Can you tell me more about how the cup could communicate with me?
This is where people think that we're very odd people because we believe that inanimate things have a life or a feeling to them.
A soul.
A soul. I believe it's to do with light and air and material design, all those things. But there's something about the tactile aspect of a cup that has been made by hands because there are tiny little variances in it that cause our sort of nervous energy to be caught in this material, and those little imperfections, nervous energy, gets translated back, and it's nicer.
Why symbols matter for you?
Symbols communicate, and symbols have always, I boil them down like an essence, and there are aspects of the human quality which I'm trying to articulate, and it's whether it's the moon, the sun, whether it's a rabbit in a field, or even if it's in the city, it's still something that's really primordial. And I am always trying to get to a more primordial place, but I'm not esoteric enough to boil it down to almost zero. I still am more for the popular man for the everyman, so I can use symbols that almost anybody can understand.
I come back to my example. I come back to my cup of tea. I'm going to put a symbol on it.
Yes, but I'm not thinking of you. I'm thinking of the cup. So when I put the symbol on, whether it's the scroll of life or the rabbit or the tree of life or a bird, it's more my relationship with the cup. And so it's up to you whether you purchase the cup, but it's up to me to have the reason for putting the bird or the tree, to sing them into life.
After the making, after the designing, there's the firing process. Tell me how it works.
My pottery is beside a river, and what I say is once I make a pot, it's fully formed, it's there, but it doesn't actually exist in our world, because if you took that pot and chucked it in the river, it would just go back to clay. So
Really?
yes, it would just dissolve and go back to clay. So what we have to do is we have to put it into an oven, a kiln, and we have to very slowly heat it up, get the steam out of it, get all the impurities out of this sort of sculptural structure that's in there, and get rid of the air. Well, you're not getting rid of the air, but you're firing out all the impurities. So it now becomes a skeleton that you chuck in the river. It doesn't go back to clay, but water will pass through it and it's porous. So then we take it out of the kiln and then we mix up in all these buckets and things, all these ground up rocks. And they're calcined, actually. They've been heated up and then they've been made into a powder, and we mix all those powders together and we add some fluxes or things to make it sort of glow, and those materials are the same that's in the clay so they can kiss and everything, and we put them back in the kiln and we fire them to 2,360 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 1280 centigrade, and that's pretty much the same as the temperatures that the earth has formed. It's very high fired, and what happens is the clay then melts, closes up, and gets its layer of glaze, and it becomes this incandescent thing that comes out, and it will last 3,000 years even on the dumps. So it's up to me to make sure if I'm bringing something into the world that it's beautiful. It must be beautiful, and maybe to me at least, and it's got to last. And even if it breaks, it's still going to be there.
It's a responsibility.
It's a huge responsibility, and it's very stressful, very stressful.
What do you feel when you open the gate of the kiln, of the oven, when it's finished?
Well, I've been making pots 40 years, and I just get so excited every time because every single firing is different, and it takes you through the most awful feelings and the best feelings. So you can have disasters, you can have triumphs, and you just don't know.
What is a disaster?
Something that you've spent hours and hours on, you thought was one of those perfect children, and it comes out and it's cracked and it's broken. Or when you spend hours making something for 6 people and they're giving it to a bride on a particular day and you can't deliver that on that day. It doesn't quite meet their expectations. That's disaster.
Is the firing process always unpredictable?
Yes and no. In the gas kiln, very much predictable. When it's open flame, when it's a wood kiln, gas kiln, yes, it's totally unpredictable. An electric kiln is like a toaster. It just goes up to temperature and down, and it's incredibly boring for a potter. There isn't any music that's going on except for a melt.
Are there traces of your fingers on your pieces? Do you like that?
All over them, absolutely all over, and I love that. And unfortunately, the customer sometimes doesn't, and we have to wipe them off a lot.
So you have to compromise all the time.
All the time, and I wish that I was stronger, that I didn't have to compromise. I could say, stuff you, and off you go, and I'll put my fingerprint there, and you'll see where my fingers were when I dipped this. Yes, and there is a spot on the inside where it dripped, and yes, that's part of the process. But people want perfection, and it's the death of the soul of things.
Is there something essential you've learned from your creative process?
I'd like to think I'm a better mother.
Why?
Because you're looking things into shape, you're expecting things from them, but often life throws you a curveball, things go wrong, things change. You have to let go, and you have to just be in awe of life. And to me, you've got to be like an open vessel and just serve, really. And that's really what I'm doing.
Serving.
It's extraordinary. Thinking about it, I really do think about it's there to serve a purpose. I'm not really into just making dust catchers or something that just sits, and is very proud of itself, but it doesn't really offer itself up to be used. It is a form of art, and everything communicates, and it's whether it's actually has a quality or feeling to it, whether it's good or bad, or that's dependent on whoever's using it. They can put it in the back of the cupboard, or they can just use it every day. But if they are using it, it's got to communicate, and it has to feel good, It has to feel really good. I think it has to make that moment that you're sipping the tea, you're eating your dinner, or you're presenting something on a plate. It's got to live up to your expectations. It's got to keep you company.
To resonate with you. I'm gonna leave the room. Please hold the microphone and add whatever you want to the interview.
What comes to my mind more than anything is a saying, and I haven't quite pinned it down, and it could be from Voltaire, but it's basically this. What is it that puts life into an inanimate object? For isn't that what man is?
Thank you, Miranda Thomas, for sharing your story. It was Sounds Like Portraits, a podcast by Philippe Ungar. Music, Charmeuse de Serpent, composed and conducted by Olivier Glisson. See you soon for the next episode.